.NET Update with Maddy Montaquila.
The Azure and DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. My returning guest today on the show is Maddy Montaquila, and she's been on the show several times, most recently in episode 244, where we were talking about .NET Maui and all things mobile. Maddy is a senior product manager on the Aspire team and has previously been on the Maui team and has been working with .NET mobile apps since 2018, working on Xamarin tooling. When she first joined Microsoft, she worked on the Xamarin team as an intern, and she realized the impact that she could have on creating amazing developer tools and frameworks, and that inspired her to pursue more roles at Microsoft, and she has done so much along the years. You can connect with her on Twitter and GitHub at Maddy Montaquila, and we'll include that in the show notes. But Maddy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you? Happy New Year. Happy 2026.
Happy New Year. Yep, recording right at the beginning of 2026. It's going to be a great year. And we kind of ended the year with a bang with the .NET Conf and .NET 10 coming out. And I want to kind of dig into that, but before we do that, there's always guests maybe that heard your previous show, but a lot of others that are maybe getting to know you for the first time. And so I like to kind of maybe back you up and ask, you're in a career in custom software. What is it about software and programming that just keeps you energized about it, where you like coming to work every day?
Oh my goodness. There's a lot. I mean, part of it is just the challenge, and the rate of change is so great. There's no way to keep up with anything. But for me, I think, and you kind of mentioned it in the bio, when I started working on developer tools, I was like, developers, I get it. I was an engineering student. I was a computer engineering student. It's like, developers are the best customer because they just have feedback. They use it. They use the thing and they get angry or very excited, often angry. It's like one of my favorite things to be able to talk to someone using software to build software, and just like the layers of challenge in that. That's the thing that I think keeps me the most excited about it. But right now is such a crazy time with the way that the world is and the industry is that there's no slow or dry moment at all. So that helps. Yeah,
for sure. Well, hot off the presses, because of Christmas vacations that everyone well-deserved took, .NET 10 has come out and Aspire, lots of things happening. Out of all the things that were kind of announced and finalized in the .NET 10 release, what kind of stands out as maybe the most exciting that people need to make sure to check out and jump onto?
Oh my goodness. I mean, the easy answer would be AI, right? Like that's the easy answer. That's the answer I'm supposed to say as a PM at Microsoft on DevTools. It's supposed to be, oh yeah, we did the extensions AI and we have all these new things in .NET to make AI easier, blah, 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 blah. Selfishly, my favorite is that it feels like an anti-.NET thing, but it's actually one of the best things I think we've done as the .NET team in a while, which is we rebranded .NET Aspire to Aspire, which was as simple as it seems to change the name of something. It is not. And we launched our own website. We shipped a command line that's decoupled from the .NET command line. And part of the reason we did this is because people were not using Aspire because they were like, well, I don't have .NET, or, oh, well, we also have JavaScript, or we also have Python, or we also have Go, or insert, soup du jour here. And we had so many .NET teams using Aspire and wanting to get the rest of their company on it because it supports all these different languages. And nobody would look at it because it was called .NET Aspire. So we said, you know what? Right. Screw it. We're dropping the name. And it's been awesome. I mean, it was a lot of work, but the reception alone and just kind of that gesture that this is a .NET built developer tool. This is a CLI that's a native AOT .NET tool. You know, we're doing all the latest things with it. We're using the single file, the file-based apps for our app host now. Like, we're riding the latest .NET features to build a platform for developers.
Yeah.
And the reception has been awesome. That's the thing that I was the most excited about. That, and then, you know, there were a bunch of little things. Like, file-based apps was just so good. So good.
Yeah.
It was a crazy release. It was a fun time.
So back in 2018, at the time, Visual Studio Team Services team did the same thing in rebranding because people thought, oh, it's just for Visual Studio developers. And then, okay, now it's Azure DevOps, Azure Pipelines, and now tons of people use it. And so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask you, with that rebrand, invariably y'all had tons of vision type conversations about what you're aiming it for. So what is the actual vision for Aspire?
Oh my gosh. Me boiled down, the vision for Aspire is it's the next VS Code, right? It's the dev tool that everybody uses for the agentic dev era or whatever, where whatever you want to call it, where we work with agents or we use AI assisted coding as like our primary form factor for most of our tasks, right? And it frees up software engineers to work on the architectural or the more complex or the user experience or the customer problems or whatever it is. So that's our vision, is this is the dev tool of the future. And there's a lot of reasons we think that. I think the more tangible vision in the short term is that you can have an app built with any language and have it orchestrated with Aspire and run, deploy, redeploy, and iterate on all from the same source file, being that one app host file. Same CLI, all your tools, you just bring in whatever cloud, whatever, if you're on-prem, I don't care. I mean, you shouldn't be on-prem unless you really need to be. Yeah, that's the dream.
So dev tool. Now, when it first came out, it seemed like the first feature sets and all we talked about was, hey, now you can just spin up things in Docker containers locally. Okay, now that's easy. And so it seems like there's a few piece parts that have to be there to make the vision go, but there's got to be part of the vision where it's not just .NET, but it's any kind of software, or is that not accurate?
No, 100% any kind of software. We have people using it today with like purely JavaScript apps, which is crazy because that means the only C# in their app is the Aspire app host file.
Okay.
And it's providing value, right? So it's fascinating just seeing the way that people have been able to kind of wield Aspire without us actually putting that much effort into that vision. And now that we are putting a lot of marbles behind that, I think we'll see it accelerate. But when we started Aspire, so I joined the team a little bit when Aspire went GA, so I guess a year and a half ago, which feels like an eternity ago. I can't believe it's only been a year and a half. But we were still kind of like, Aspire is like a stack. It's a framework. It's a template. And we kind of had an identity crisis for a long time where we came around and we said, we're building a platform. We're building APIs. We're building a thing that you type into your computer and you write code. But at its core, it's a dev tool, even though you're writing code. But you're writing tooling into your app. You're writing your own custom app experience for your developers and your teams and your platforms in your source instead of it living separately. And that's when we really pivoted to, this is a tool. That's the simplest way to describe it. Obviously, it's like you said, it's a lot of pieces that had to come together. But yeah.
Well, I've and everybody have been using Aspire since it came out in the different versions. And one thing that I'm really hopeful and excited about, but it's a problem that has plagued every development team, which is whether you get a new machine or a new developer comes onto the team. Okay, how do I get the environment going? Or heck, I'm starting a new piece of software and now I've got all of these pieces of the DevOps environment starting locally. And how do I make that the easy button? I mean, GitHub has now template repositories. So shouldn't I just be able to clone over from a template GitHub repository and start something new and it just work?
You'd think. You would think. And then it's like, oh, wait, but you need to set these 3 environment variables that you have to read this README that's buried in this other README. That was, I think, one of the first stories that we told with Aspire that actually made sense end to end was Aspire, if you wield it, you can clone and run anything. The only thing you need is to install the dependencies, right? Like the actual, like, if you don't have Node, you can't run a Node app. If you don't have .NET, you can't run a .NET app. And we've heard that over and over again as like the most exciting thing. Like we will hear people be like, we onboarded an intern and we gave them their machine and they were writing code at lunch. And like that hasn't happened ever. And it's all because of Aspire. And they're like, what is this thing? And so that value prop has always been very near and dear to my heart. The next thing we're looking at is like, do we start installing things for you? And then it's like, are we overreaching? What are we doing? But then it's cool because, I mean, imagine if your versions were never mismatched from the rest of your team because the version was defined in the source.
Well, if Aspire can't install something, who is going to? I mean, isn't that what Puppet kind of built the whole business on? There's some reason on some machine that something has to be installed.
Yep.
How's it going to get there?
Yep. There's like, developers, I think another fascinating part of developers as customers is like, we all really are control freaks. And so I don't like when people install things for me when I can install them myself, because I'm like, well, I use Winget or Homebrew if I'm on my Mac, or for Python, I use this thing, or I use this random tool to install and manage my .NET versions or whatever. And so when things start stomping on my system, I get very upset. But at the same time, if it's isolated, if there's a way we're able to isolate it into a repo, especially when you're working on these like big enterprise apps, it's actually not that bad. Probably.
Yeah. Well, these big enterprise apps, you can say, oh, just break it up and just fix it. Well, that's a decade-long problem. There are all these there's big old applications that, there's like 30 different things that have to be installed and configured just so. And okay, we can say, hey, let's fix it. But that's not going to happen tomorrow.
No, definitely not. And technical debt is so expensive. Like companies, it's so hard to sell your leadership on it. Like the amount of times we're like, we just want to take a month and just work on bugs. And we get like 2 weeks in and then someone's like, the Azure team is asking for this. And we're like, okay, there were our 2 peaceful weeks. It's all over now. The less time you can spend or the more time you can spend incrementally improving your developer lifecycle instead of having to like overhaul it in one go, I think is the way, hopefully, that we will move in the future. But it's hard. It's a hard problem.
Now, just in the last release, there were some big advancements in deployments to Azure and creating resources in Azure. So with the .NET 10 version of Aspire, what now works like you want it to work, and what gaps still exist that you're working on when it comes to maybe replacing like all those big old PowerShell scripts that people have for configuring and creating some resources in Azure just to have the environment like it needs to be?
Yeah. I'm gonna nitpick one thing because it's a common misconception, and I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking at the mailman. It's that time of day. But Aspire has its own versioning strategy. So part of what we did is we actually hard broke our version in November because people were getting confused that it was like, it's .NET 10, but it's Aspire 10. And we were like, we ship at a different pace. We will always support the latest in support .NETs in the same way that like with Aspire, you can run the latest in support Node or Pythons. Like we're not going to block support for those things. We build on generally the newer .NET LTS features. So like we're going to bump our repo to 10 and only use 10 for Aspire itself, but you can use whatever you want in your apps. So you don't have to be on .NET 10 to use the latest Aspire stuff. Aspire has its own versioning strategy. We switched it to 13 because we were like, 11 feels like we're just trying to break off by one. And why would you do 12 when you could do 13? 13's more fun. So we're on Aspire 13 now. 13.1 actually, because we shipped again because we're crazy. Deployment wise, 13 was like a whole overhaul of everything. We spent Where Aspire differs from a lot of the existing kind of infrastructure as code tools is we did developer first. Like we did the dev lifecycle first. And when you look at something like Terraform or those types of tools, or if you look at actions and those types of scripts, they're all really about the deployment, and then you can retroactively fit dev into that. And AZD, the Azure Developer CLI, was a good tool that kind of started to bridge that gap where like it was meant for dev time and you can do AZD up and all these things to spin up your environments, but it's Azure. Yeah. And they had been wanting to do some kind of local orchestration thing and hadn't really like nailed exactly how that was going to work within their ecosystem yet. And so we came at it from the different direction around the same time where we said, hey, we have all these .NET people trying to run things. Let's build a local orchestrator, and then let's figure out how to hook it into the cloud. And we rely on AZD for a lot of that. So what we did in Aspire 13 is we formalized how we actually are going to define deployments within the app host. So within the C# that you write that orchestrates your app locally when you F5, and also when you do Aspire deploy or whatever your deployment mechanism is in your CI. And we went through a lot of iterations on it. And so I know you've been following along, and folks who have been following along with the Aspire deployment journey have seen so many changes in just the last year. I mean, originally we started with, we're just going to do AZD, and AZD is going to read the app host and translate it. And then if you want to deploy with anything else, you're on your own. And then we had a community project called Aspirate, which is awesome. That does Kubernetes-based like it takes the app host and it turns it into Kubernetes. And then we said, why are we having other people read the app host? The app host should know and be able to tell you what it is. And so we switched the model, and now we have like integrations that their whole point is being able to take the resources and define them as what it is. And so we formalized the Azure Container Apps one, and App Service was kind of the first other we did besides ACA, because we have a really good partnership with both of those teams. And you can now pick and choose where and how to deploy things and define deployments in code. And what the app host does is becomes the source of truth. So it generates the bicep for you. You don't have to go and write bicep anymore. As if you define it in the app host, we generate it for you. Which means you have things like type completion and squigglies that say, no, you can't make min replica a string. Like, that's not allowed. I mean, that's a terrible example because I'm sure it is actually a string because of how bicep works. But all that. The other thing that we did in 13 that's newer and that we're continuing to build out is a concept of pipeline steps. And so one thing we heard from everybody is, I don't want a black box to deploy in. AZD up is great for development, but I can't run AZD up in my CI because I expect Dependabot or this code check, health check to run, or I need my test to run. I need someone to post something in a Slack channel. Yeah. I'm sure you know all about this because this is your whole world. So we made the ability to split these. We have the pre-built ones, right? We have the container apps and app services, and those have a variety of steps. But we also made it so you can build your own steps that do anything because it's code. And then you can package those up and share those with your teams too. So you can build a pipeline, whatever it is.
So is it a one way where you expect the generated bicep to be then checked into Git, or is it, hey, we're just going to, can bicep be the intermediate language where it's all defined in C# and it's just, under the covers, we happen to be generating bicep and running it, but no, we don't expect generated code to become your human source.
Correct. That's the latter. So we want to generate it on the fly. It's nice to be able to see it. We control goes back to developers and control, right? Like people want to be able to see what bicep you're going to spit out, especially if you know your way around bicep. Right. And same with YAML and insert just cloud modeling language here.
Well, that's what all the UI controls for the web that would generate HTML and then expect you to modify that HTML from then on forward. Those tools went by the wayside because that model doesn't work.
Exactly. And that's how we started, because we were like, can we do the other way? But as we've gotten further into the journey, we're like, no, like the code is the source of truth. What makes it nice is for someone like you who works a lot on the DevOps side of the house, right? And maybe isn't always invested. I'm sure you wish you were, but we see a lot of teams where the DevOps people are called in after the dev team has been like, so we added the database. And the DevOps team is like, how do I deploy? You're going to, what? helps bridge that gap because it's all in one place, and the developers have to kind of think about how they're going to define this when they're building it out.
Yeah.
And then the DevOps team has the control to say, well, we need you to edit the source to generate, or they go in and edit the source to do this. And instead of the dev team working in code and the DevOps team working in different code, everybody now works in the same file or files and the same source of truth, which helps, hypothetically. It also might cause more issues, arguments. I'm not taking credit for that.
Nice.
Hypothetically, it helps.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Aspire is right for a key AI scenario. And I want to understand if it is now or if it soon will be. Forget deploying to production, but if I delegate something to Copilot Coding Agent or any of these tools and say, here's a feature, like I've created a spec for a feature. Here's a feature, just go handle it. I'm going to lunch. And then, okay, there's a bunch of code that's written. To get to the answer to the question I want to know is, should I even spend my time on this? Did it actually work, or do I have a code base that's broken? The tool has to actually be able to run the full private build, every test suite that I have, and deploy it somewhere and deploy the test suite that is my full system tests against some type of representative full-time deployment and still be in that coding tools loop so that it doesn't declare finished before those things happen. How close are we to having the infrastructure to support that?
It's there, and it's magical. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's there. And I use it now all the time. We think about AI on like 3 different levels on the .NET team in particular, because most people will think about using AI and building AI, right? So using coding agents to accelerate it, and then how do we make it easier to build AI into your apps? Because obviously then you swipe your credit card on Azure for the model, and we're all very happy, or wherever you want to host it. But, I need to get paid somehow. So at the end of the day, we want you to go to Azure. The third way that the .NET team thinks about it is how you actually like model and talk about AI, which is the MEAI stuff. That's so out of my realm. I don't understand. For me, as a DevTools person, it's always been the first one, which is, how do I make it better to use a coding agent? Mm-hmm. And a year ago, we started working on a version of Copilot that lived in the dashboard. And so when you F5 your Aspire app, the dashboard pops up. It shows you all your resources. That's where you can see the logs and any of the open telemetry you have wired up. And the Copilot in the dashboard was able to kind of transverse, whatever the word is, that whole thing, and tell you what's going on with your app, or say, hey, this thing isn't working, this thing is. MCPs weren't really a thing yet. Mm-hmm. So they had just started coming to the forefront. And so, if MCPs existed a year ago, that's probably where we would have started. But we didn't pick that back up until over the summer. We said, it would probably be cool if this lived in the editor side where you're using the coding agent already so that it can talk to it. Mm-hmm. And we drew a lot of inspiration from how Playwright did their MCP, which is, if you haven't used it, honestly, like one of the most magical experiences, because it can just interact with the browser. It just does whatever it wants. You don't need to have Playwright working. It's eyes. It gives your agent eyes. It can take screenshots and like critique itself and everything. And so we built the first pass of the Aspire MCP, which would turn on when you were in the app, the same way that Copilot in the dashboard did, but then you could talk to it from VS Code. And then we were like, well, it should just always be running. Like, it's weird that you have to turn it off and turn it on. You get an error. So we made it persistent. And then we've moved it into the command line and standard IO. And so the latest release, Aspire MCP, is kind of, ever present, like the rest of the MCPs, like how normal ones work. And what it does is any resource, it can tell the coding agent can ask it for logs or metrics or status, and it can execute commands on it. So there's the things we give you, start and stop and restart, which if you make a, major code change and you don't want to spin up the whole stack, those are great. But that also means if you build custom commands, like clear the database, very easy to do in Aspire. You can do that in a couple lines of code. Your Copilot, your coding agent can do that now too. So it can wield your full stack. It can see all of the logs. It doesn't have to spin up a bunch of different processes and manage killing a bunch of different processes. All it needs to do is keep track of Aspire. And it's made it so much easier, because if you're working on one one or two, maybe like a front end, back end situation. You're using Docker, you spin up a container. The coding agent does okay, but it has to look too many places to figure out what's going on, and you have to constantly remind it where to look and what to restart and what to keep track of. And the Aspire MCP just does it all for you.
Now that's all local, right?
All local.
All local. Okay, so that covers all the local coding agents: Copilot, Claude, Cursor, Junie. That's cool. Okay, so how does one enable that, or is it automatic?
Right now, you have to run Aspire MCP init. It's just like a command line command. And that will say, hey, we found Claude and VS Code and whatever on your machine. Do you want us to hook it up for that? And it'll drop the right files into the right places. We're looking at if we should do more of a generic way. I mean, right now, the way that you install an MCP entirely depends on the MCP. So we might just hang out and wait to see if a pattern emerges. But for us, the CLI tends to be our source of truth. Like, everything will always work with the Aspire CLI, and then we'll build better experiences for things that we feel like it's important to on top of that.
So with that workflow, then it would stand to reason that the engineers on the Aspire team are probably using that flow for at least some of the simple things and delegating to Copilot. Is that institutionalized yet, or is that experimental?
The Aspire team, for sure. We are one of the more like AI forward teams. I think we're lucky because Aspire, we made a new repo. We don't have the legacy .NET stuff in it.
Yep.
It's only 2 years old. So we built it with not this world. It's changed a lot, but we built it with this like kind of rapid iteration in mind. And that's helped a lot. I mean, you can't go into something like .NET Core and expect a coding agent to just understand. For Aspire, there's less context and there's less history, so there's less stuff for us to break, and there's less people for us to break and edge cases that we know.
Base.
But we crank it. I mean, I love the Copilot in GitHub in particular, like assigning in an issue and saying, hey, go work on this, and then it comes back to me. We built a way to actually pull from our CLI any PR. So if Copilot, or, we started it because we wanted to be able to test other people's stuff, but it's worked out great for Copilot, where I can now say, like, Aspire update to this specific PR build and run those bits and every package in Aspire on my machine. And that's helped us accelerate it a lot too, and kind of verify the changes. So for me, because I'm a PM, like, I can't write product code all the time. So if I want a new icon in the dashboard, I have to go to James Newton King and say, James, can you make some time to like do all of the things and create the new branch and shepherd this thing through? Now I just assign Copilot to it. I'm like, hey, Copilot, I need you to do this. Hey, James, make sure that it didn't do anything crazy. Okay,
so let me ask you about that, because you mentioned the MCP server and the flow running locally. When you assign to Copilot coding agent, it's running in a Linux VM on the GitHub server, which are actually in Azure. But is all of the Aspire stack running on that Linux VM in the same way that it's running locally now?
So for us, contributing to our own repo, no, because it just runs the build commands that it would. We are trying to orchestrate the Aspire repo with Aspire. It's kind of a crazy idea. We'll see if it works. Yeah. But if you're using GitHub Copilot coding agent on your Aspire-ified repo, yeah, it will Aspire run to validate its work. If you tell it to. I mean, I imagine you have to put it in the instruction somewhere.
Okay, because that's been a journey on some of the application teams I'm working with now. Is getting everything to run on that Linux VM, because otherwise Copilot coding agent can't get it into the context and know that, oh, something was broken, and so we're not done yet. And like every little command in PowerShell that ran on Windows fine for years, well, we need to make sure that it's 100% Linux compatible. Otherwise, CCA can't run it. And by the way, if a certain automated test case is not 100% compatible with Linux, CCA can't run it.
Yeah, that's what makes Aspire cool, is it's a .NET executable. Like, Aspire doesn't host the processes, right? So if you're using Aspire to spin up building a WinForms app, no, that's not going to work on Linux. But Aspire will start the processes for anything else. And that includes, JavaScript, Docker,
Yeah.
PowerShell scripts if you have them. And
Okay,
so if it,
so all of those Docker containers are spinning up on that Linux VM in Copilot, and that MCP server is reading the logs from them running in the Docker. So if something goes weird, Copilot Coding Agent knows to keep iterating because it's not done yet.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. And one of the things that's cool about Aspire and our test story, I think it's one of the things that we keep saying we're going to, like, oh yeah, this is the release. We're going to go really do some cool stuff with testing. And then we keep not because other things happen. One of the things we've seen a pattern of and would love to formalize is people mocking out some of the containers and things where they say, hey, you know, like for the sake of Coding Agent, I don't need it to actually spin up a database every time for this. So when I'm running my test suite, like mock the tool, except for your Aspire app host is kind of the pattern we see people try to wield. And that's something that I think is really fascinating to me too, because then that gives you the option to say, hey, I know this is not going to run in CCA, so let me just not run that when I, you know, let me tell Copilot Coding Agent to run this launch profile or whatever it is when it's iterating. We haven't formalized that yet. So people of the world, please let me know if that is interesting to you. You can definitely do it. It's just it's a choose your own adventure right now.
I just realized that we've been slinging the new 3-letter acronym CCA. Is that official Copilot Coding Agent now, or is that real? Or is it... Okay.
I don't actually know. Internally, it was called Padawan, so we all called it Padawan for a long time, and we had to like out train ourselves.
Yeah, because if the marketing name is Copilot Coding Agent, it's not going to work. I'm not going to say that many syllables all the time.
No, that's a great point. I'm gonna have to ask some questions. Yeah. I usually call it like Copilot on GitHub, which is not. It's descriptive, but it's not a very catchy name.
Yeah, still a lot of syllables.
Yeah.
So, well, you mentioned SQL Server, and for a long time, .NET devs have been used to, and every application has a SQL Server of some size. Even if we're going to Azure Container Apps, okay, great. The simplest architecture then is something running in the container in Azure and a little Azure SQL database. It's like every application has at least those things. And so with the vision of Aspire and the local development environment, is it your opinion that SQL Server should now be in a container instead of just on the local box in SQL Express or SQL Developer Edition?
I think it still depends on your needs. Generally, I containerize now, mostly because I work across operating systems a lot too. So I'll be working on the same repo on my Mac and my PC. Because I have a desktop and I have a Mac laptop. So if I want to go sit on my couch. So there are definitely ways to make that all run locally as kind of a native process. But for me, containers are the default. And I think there are enough options out there. Like we always use Docker as the colloquial. It's like saying saran wrap or insert, your thing there. It's like, oh yeah, it's Docker, but you can use Podman or Rancher or whatever other container runtime you want. And now that the operating systems are coming out with their own native ones, it's like, oh, we should probably make sure those work too. And
just a matter of time.
Yeah. So containers feel to me like the least common denominator, which is generally what I go for now when I try to build tools or build, code that people are going to work on. But if you want to run it locally, I'm not going to stop you. You can run an executable.
I understand that, but if we're going to get the benefit of Aspire, are you testing every day with the assumption that, okay, this works as long as it's in a container? If it's just something that's on the box, you're kind of on your own or partially on your own?
Well, we run like the code. Like if you have a Node app or a JavaScript or a Python app, all those things run locally on the Metal by default. They don't run containerized because we want you to be able to use your tools in your debugging. That was a very important thing we said was, when you go to deploy it, it's going to behave differently because it's going to be containerized. So you have to test for that case. But I don't want to run my JavaScript app on a container locally. I want to use hot module replacement and whatever. So you can model and run things as a local process in Aspire, whatever it is. If it's a command line tool, you can run it with Aspire. But I'm not sure, and I don't want to say this confidently because I'm not sure, but I think you will have a better experience with Aspire running something like SQL, something like a database in a container over a native process, just because the tools we have to talk to that type of thing in a container are really, really good. and it would have to be a custom case for any local process. So we build custom cases for Node and JavaScript and Python, but we're not going to go do that for databases necessarily.
All right. That helps because that's a good, other than the it depends answer, that's a good answer that, hey, if we were using SQL Express for some of the easier databases locally, we're going to have a better time if we just move it into SQL Docker.
Yeah, probably.
Perfect.
And it's going to be easier to deploy it. Like, it's easy. Containers are the way.
Now, you mentioned easier to deploy. Are you saying that over time SQL in a container in Azure that's gonna win out over Azure SQL?
No. I get asked a lot, like, what's the, app service or ACA? Or like, should I use Azure SQL or Azure Managed Redis? Or they all exist for a reason. And so I imagine there's use cases for all of it. For me, like, again, containers being the lowest common denominator, like, I can just spin up an ACA kind of container apps environment, and it's very easy, one click out of the box experience. I think if I wanted more control, maybe I would move towards something like Azure SQL, but I'm not a huge database person, so I don't.
Yeah.
I make them work. And I say,
it seems like it seems like if we want, let me say AI, but if we want robots to do more and more in the software world, then we have to make these decisions around standardization.
Yes.
We have to move from it depends. Well, it can depend if you're going to assign a person, a DBA, a developer, if you're going to assign somebody to, watch that system with a pager and all. But if we need it to just run and have these robot processes that are looking at the logs and maybe restarting something, then we have to standardize, don't we?
Yep. Pretty much. And it helps future-proof like teams for if they were to, we see a lot of more like cross-cloud, I think, operations now. Like people will say like, we run on Azure, but we have like backups, or we have an on-prem situation, or especially for like white labeled software. So we build this general purpose tool, but we also run on-prem for specific use cases, whether it's government or healthcare or banks or whatever. You kind of need to be able to pick up and lift and shift your software, and containers make that, completely seamless versus using the managed services. So we see that too, but that's, we're getting into the enterprisiest of the enterprises with that kind of use case.
Right.
The enterprises on top of the enterprises. So
right. Well, as we kind of close up, you started with AI. I kind of want to end it with AI. If we're going to be entering an era where we're creating agents, and I'm not talking about like the Microsoft 365 agent that's just a little helper chatbot. I'm talking about a little piece of software that uses a language model for some type of prompting, and it just does something. I mean, that's kind of the epitome of a microservice, right? You got these little agents running around, but guess what? It's kind of a pretty small application. And so it's going to be a kind of a small Git repository, but it's still going to have, am I thinking about that right? What are your thoughts on that type of application?
I mean, it's easy. It's easy for me to say like, yeah, everything should be like this. Smacks fist. But also I work on the .NET team, so I've seen, and I know you have too. And I am sure that there are people listening to this who are like, yeah, if I could get off a .NET Framework 4.8, I would love to use Aspire. So it's like, I get it. Everything is different, and every software is a mishmash. And for some companies, spinning up a new repo is like a multiple week process, and everyone wants it in one. And for some companies, if you try to put something in the core repo, you're going to get smacked. And so there's different patterns depending on the culture, really. So with Aspire, our thing is, you should be able to model any of it. You should be able to model it in the code. It should work. We have things that work better than others. Like our multi-repo story right now is still very hands-off. You have to clone everything yourself. Use Git submoduling. I don't know. You can automate it in various ways. But we've yet to build like an app host and an app host situation, which is something we've heard a lot about. And so for that reason, I would say, yeah, like we actually are kind of on the pro modular monolith thing, if you want to look at that quadrant or whatever you want to describe it as. Because yeah, it's one source, but it's modular, all the pieces run individually. But that's just our opinion and where we started, because that's where we saw a lot of the apps that wanted to use Aspire. I don't think it's correct. And at this point, like, everything's on the table. It might end up making sense that it should all be a big mono repo again, because of the way that coding agents work. But it also might make sense that everything needs to be an individual testable piece again, like even more than it is now.
But it seems like we are entering into an era where we're going to have... If the AI tools are going to write more lines of code that we don't have to, we're going to have an explosion of software.
Yes.
It's just going to happen. So.
And engineers have to become more multifunctional, and PMs too. Like
actual engineers, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of like, maybe I could after all. And then I was like, well, I don't really want to.
Well, there's some. I remember this one young programmer I ran into in the Amazon rainforest on vacation. And he's, I'm studying to be a programmer, but I don't know if there's going to be a career left for me. And I had to straighten him out. But these people get computer science degrees and software engineering degrees. And then, in my early time, it's like, great, I did a little bit of engineering, and then I did a whole lot of construction. I did a whole lot of hammering nails, screwing screws, cutting the wood, a whole lot of construction. I mean, my fingers touched every single line of code. That's construction. Whereas, wait a minute, if we can automate a lot of the construction, well, now I can actually spend more of my time actually doing engineering.
Yes.
Who would have thought?
Yes. And solving like the bigger problems, and just the burden of tech debt is going to hopefully be so much less. Like once we get really good at wielding these things, for me, it's like, oh my God, it actually makes sense for me to refactor out stuff, because I know that Copilot will do it and test it all while I'm building something else.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I will say, like 6 months ago, it's January, yeah. So 6 months ago, I was like, we're screwed. Software is dead. And a year ago, I was like, I think this is going to be the most amazing thing ever. And then I kind of have fluctuated between those 2 points, and I'm just now in the last few months leveling out. I think it helps that Aspire, we've gotten way more hands-on with the AI stuff, so I really can see it. And I mean, the role's going to change. But like, we didn't have computers 50 years ago. We all still have jobs. Architects still exist, even though they don't draft things on giant pieces of paper anymore. The role's going to change. But if you're a software engineer, like, you know how to adapt to things. Like, that's kind of one of the core traits I think we have. So it's going to be fine. It's just going to be crazy.
And we haven't even talked about the IoT industry, where invariably all of those programs are super small anyway.
Yes.
And so it's like, hey, I need to read this sensor, I need to send some data, and then I wake up every this many minutes and do it again. Hey, Copilot, can you kind of make that happen, please?
Oh, for me, the side projects have been the best part of this. I do fantasy football league with our friends every year. And this year I made a scoreboard. I got like a little matrix display, and it cycled through the league scores every Sunday so we could see who was winning and losing and the percentages. Yeah. And I would just never, ever have had the time to figure out CPython and like whatever.
Right.
Circuit Python. And I was watching Red Zone one Sunday, and I was typing away on my MacBook, and I was like, okay, Copilot, oh, that doesn't look right. Make it do this. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to go to imposter.palermo.cc, and there's a GitHub repository on my Jeffrey Palermo GitHub. I made that with my kids, just from a little bit of prompting, the imposter game, because we wanted our own categories and our own words, and tweak it a little bit and have multi-imposter. And it's just a little website that's formatted for mobile. But like, it would have taken how long to my kids' attention span, sludging through the code. And now, I mean, we played that yesterday over the dinner table. So, oh
my gosh, that's so fun. That's
like your example. Everybody's going to have an example like that where, man, I wish I had had this many hours to crochet this sweater. But look, I just told an automated machine, and look, I have a crocheted sweater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like it's a lot of it is the construction stuff. Like it's not even the fun stuff. I still go in. Yeah. I like to read you have to be able to, at this point, I don't know what'll happen in the future because nobody knows anything anymore. At this point, though, you still have to be able to go in and read the code and understand what's happening and say, like, oh, I get why this is doing this. Yeah. And like you have to be very, hands-on with it. maybe that becomes less so in the future, but for me, it's also a good learning tool. Like, I can tweak a line in an existing program and see what happens instead of having to write the whole program, figure out why it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, as long as we are checking in C# into the Git repository, the C# still has to be good.
Yes.
And software professionals have to know what good is.
Yes. We talk about giving like the agent guardrails a lot. So like, how do you, like, IntelliSense is my favorite example. Like, there's a squiggly, and so the agent says, "Oh, this is syntactically incorrect." And so tooling, which everyone was like, "Oh, everything's going back to the CLI," like blah blah blah. It's like becoming re-important again. Same with CI stuff. I mean, the error messages have to be clear and machine readable, not just human readable, and they have to be consistent. Because the coding agent has to be able to iterate. Like, we need to get, it's like bowling with the bumpers on. Otherwise, it's just going to roll it into the gutter whenever it gets a little confused. And Aspire, we talk about it all the time, like the guardrails that an Aspire integration or et cetera will bring. And it's as a tooling nerd, tooling is like going to be the way now. So I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Well, man, I would love to keep on going, but we're going to have to close it here. But Maddy, thanks so much for coming back on the show and kind of giving us an update on what you're working on and Aspire and .NET and AI. This is a great conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Oh, my pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.